Hello everybody, it is Marty McConnell, Off-Grid Gecko here, and it's raining outside, so I've been doing some work in the house today and taking a nap after the farmer's market. But I have something in store that I think you guys will like. I've been getting a lot of questions on the video about my Ozark Trail camp knife that I've been toting around. I have the bag up here. So basically this is a $20 Walmart knife. Actually, I've got it pulled up right here. It's listed at $18.73, so $19-20, especially after tax. As I said in the other video, I didn't think it was going to be a bad knife. I don't think there are many bad knives out there. I mean, just in general speaking, to put things in my perspective so you know kind of where I'm coming from. If you went and handed this to that Iceman that they found up in the frozen north preserved and told him he could have it and he didn't have to kill anybody for it, I mean, that dude would be in debt to you for forever. He would think that even crappy modern knives, by comparison to the brass axe that he was carrying with him, are just absolute magic. So you don't need to have a super expensive knife to go out in the bush. Now, there are companies that make really, really nice knives and really thought out designs and everything, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about a budget knife. Essentially, $20 for a camp knife is cheap by today's standard. I think the last Knives of Alaska knife that I looked at ran over $100. And that was D2 stainless steel, and it was just, it looked like it was a well-manufactured deal. But for me, I wanted to, as I said in the last video, I think, I wanted to get something before I started doing a lot of research and then ended up spending a lot of money on something that's only going to get used for a singular purpose or two and not really looking for anything. So I know most of you don't have the same kind of general idea about knives that I have. I mean, I believe a knife is a knife for knife things. You know, if you want to split wood, use an axe. If you want to chop, use an axe or a machete or a saw, or get a tool that's designed for the job. But a lot of people want out of a bushcraft knife is a lot more than I would ever ask from a knife in general. So to be quite to the point, I think I've gotten enough use out of this now that I could talk about it a little bit. I'm going to include some shots, like a close-up of the knife and this little modification that I'll get to in a second. But basically, out of the box, functionally, as I said before, there's a danger point right here on the finger grip at the very front. And this is going to be a little blurry, and I'm not going to adjust the camera automatically because it'll just screw everything up. But there's a little... I mean, the finger grip comes around like this and it goes straight to edge. So what I've done is taken a mill file and just knocked the edge off that point. That was the first thing I did with this knife because I do have a tendency to do close-up work, and I will grip it like this. And I'll even grip it further down the blade for doing like fine cutting and shaving. And that was just going to cut the hell out of my finger. So I just went ahead and knocked it down before injury was sustained. The coating on here is super hard and super slick. So as far as fire starting goes, I wonder if I have my starter just laying up here on the table or not. I don't know, it's probably around here somewhere. Here's a little Boy Scout fire starter. Okay, and if you try to like just take the back of this blade and race it across this ferrous area, it's not going to spark. And so at the beginning that had me vexed. I was like, well, maybe it's just not sharp enough or whatever, but it feels like it's sharp enough that it should toss a spark. So what I finally figured out was it is this black coating that's on here that's really preventing this. So I took my file, and back here at the back of the blade, there's these little grooves, which are a good spot for striking on a steel anyway. And I just basically ran the file over there to file down that coating and just knock that powder coat off and leave kind of a burr on it. So now if I scratch that piece against my ferro, then sparks go everywhere. So quick, easy fix. If you don't have a file, you probably don't need to be messing with knives anyway, so get one if you don't have one. Even a cheap file, they come in handy for everything. So moving on, that stuff I kind of talked about, I think, a little bit in the last video. The one gripe that I have about this knife now going into it, and it's just a minor, almost a cosmetic thing, but I don't know if you can, you hear that? The scales are not completely secure, so there's a little bit of movement on the scales. I haven't tried to solve the problem yet. They're holding on just fine, and functionally this doesn't, you know, it's no cause for concern really. It's just every once in a while you start carving with it and you hear that annoying little click, and it was a little unsettling at first, but things held up well. So some points of reference: the knife blade is actually bent forward from the handle, and this has not been a problem for me. I didn't know what to make of it, if it would be a help or a hindrance, but for the most part, working with the knife, I don't notice that it's there, so that's probably a good thing. If I don't notice it, then that means they did something right with the design, because it doesn't impede the flow of movement. I've been carving random things. I hewed down this spoon and carved it with that knife, so it's been put through the paces a little bit. Can't really dig out the hollow in the spoon with it because the way the blade's shaped, so I'll probably have to find another tool for that, or just keep chipping away at it a little bit at a time like I've been doing in my spare time. But this is oak that's been drying and curing now for about 6 months, so it's pretty hard wood, and this thing will just peel shavings right off of it. I mean, it just throws little curly cues. So it's plenty sharp out of the package. I just finally sharpened it today, even though it really just needed a touch up. I just wanted to go ahead and put a full sharp on it just to make sure that it would take an edge fine, and it did, and it's shave sharp now, so I can pull hair off my arm, and it was almost shave sharp when I got it. I mean, it would pluck a couple hairs out, so it comes out of the box pretty sharp, ready to use. And the next feature or point of this knife is this blade is pretty wide. Don't know if I have my tape measure, I think it's in the truck, but this got to be at least 1.5 inches wide all the way down the blade. The drop point on this has a pretty good amount of curvature to it, so I can dig in and do a little bit of scraping out with it as far as carving is concerned, but it's not quite rounded off enough for that. This is basically like a little mini machete, how it's styled and set up. So as far as chopping, light chopping with it, it does fine. I have a piece of wood right here. Grab this off the firewood pile. So, I mean, it will dig a little bit, but this is not an axe. It's not heavy. That barely kind of struck into this piece of oak. So, if you're looking for a chopping knife, a machete or at least something with a Bowie length blade would probably be better than this. It's a little light for that. The steel on this is 7 chromium, 17 moly vanadium steel. So that's basically 440A stainless with a little more, is it vanadium in it or moly? A little more vanadium in it. So what does that mean? It means it's stainless steel, and 440 has pretty much been the run-of-the-mill stainless steel for making knives as long as I've been alive. It is a stainless steel, so you don't necessarily have to keep this thing super oiled. I mean, I've been abusing this. I use it and toss it in the sheath, and you'll see on there, you probably saw in the pictures that I put up, that I don't keep this clean all the time. I literally just wash this before I turn the camera on and after I got those other shots. So, you know, it's you don't really have to care after it like you would a normal high carbon steel knife. It's plenty hard and it keeps an edge well. I was not able to find an actual figure for the Rockwell hardness, but with this kind of steel, they're usually treated to the mid-50s on the heat treat. Again, that's what the manufacturer, they know. I don't, and they're not going to post it or publish it, then I can't really say for sure what it is, or at least I haven't been able to locate it. So if you happen to have a hardness Rockwell test or something like that, or you know where the information's published that will tell you the Rockwell hardness of this, feel free to post it in the comments so we can all see it, and I'll add it to the description too if somebody posts it or if I find out later. But yeah, so this thing is big, like I said. So if you're looking for a knife for fine duty work, I definitely recommend getting something smaller than this. For a bushcraft knife, for you bushcraft guys out there, you might find this a little on the small side and a little on the light side. I mean, this the blade looks to be about 3/16 of an inch thick. So a little bit more than an eighth, a little less than a quarter. I have done a little bit of batoning with it. I don't recommend batoning knives anymore because I destroyed an expensive SOG knife by trying to baton with it one time, and it literally just bent and twisted that blade to crap. And I got that as a present, so now I've got a twisted piece of junk metal for a present, and I just hope the person who gave it for me, well, he's probably going to watch this video at some point, so yeah, I screwed up that knife royally that you gave me. You're welcome. So I used to be batoning with the knives in front of the wood stove here just because it's a little lower impact on the floor of the house and everything else. I try not to do it anymore. I did take this guy for a few rounds, and I mean, again, this thing's light and it's skinny. It's not prying the wood apart like it maybe should. The bevel, the primary bevel on this blade goes from the front to about 1/4 of an inch from the back. So it's a very, very, very narrow bevel. I mean, it's a slicing bevel. It's not really set up for chopping and splitting. And I wouldn't recommend it for that purpose. You could get away with it, but question is for how long. The blade's definitely stout enough to handle it, but you're going to end up beating your mallet to crap. So if you're just using a block of wood for a mallet, you probably get away with it for a while, but the back of this knife is going to tear up your mallet very, very quickly. Sorry about that little interruption. It is temperature around here can't figure itself out today because it's rather warm outside and it's raining, and so I've got the wood stove kicked on. The camera kind of overheated. So anyways, in closing, I don't think this is a bad knife, especially for $20. You got a decent steel, decent hardness. It'll take and hold an edge just fine either way. It wasn't too much of a bear to sharpen. I mean, it wasn't, like I said, really dull or anything, but I just put it on my little Sharpie stone here. I don't remember what this thing's called at this point. I bought it a long time ago. Work sharp. And I brought the edge right back into alignment and got it set up, and we're cutting and shaving again. I have used this to do this spoon. Now when I was doing this spoon, I started off hewing this down with the knife. I think at some point I put the knife down and I just grabbed my hatchet to finish that job. It's more effective. That's hardened oak. On green wood, this would be passable for a little bit of chopping and hewing, but I wouldn't recommend it as your primary tool. I've done some carving with it, as I said, so it carves nicely. The sharp blade and this shallow wedge actually work to your advantage when you're carving. Sit. And I've used it as a draw knife to de-strip bark, and it works really, really well for that. I mean, you can get there's enough room here, you can get a second hand on here. I recommend wearing a glove and just work it down. Be extra careful if you're not wearing a glove, because this drop point is not dropped quite far enough. It will dig into the palm of your hand, but it works excellent for that. And I think all around for what you would normally need a camp knife for, it services just fine. So yeah, I think I'll put my stamp of approval on this. It's held up. I don't put knives through torture tests or throw them at trees or any of that. Like I said, if the loose grip bothers you, that may be just a lemon on this one, or that may be a manufacturing defect with tolerances, or them not getting these screws tight enough, or I haven't really investigated it to figure out what's going on exactly. But for the moment, like I said, it's not bothering me, so I'm just going to leave it be. These screws do protrude up a little bit from the scales also, so you will feel them at some point running your hand up and down this point. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but other than that, $20. It's not a bad piece of hardware to add to your kit, and especially if you're going to be carrying an axe or a machete with you into the brush, this guy will service just fine. Like I said, if I had to do it again, I'd probably go with a slightly smaller blade, just so I get a little more fine detail work. But there's not a whole hell of a lot of fine detail work to do when you're building a shelter. So it cuts fine. It cuts rope and cord and everything else that I've put it to the test with. Can probably shave paper with it. Let me see. I have a paper here. And yep. So cuts just fine. Little strips of paper. And it's about that sharp out of the box. I mean, you may have to touch up the blade a little bit, but it's pretty sharp when it comes. So, sliced a nice little gash in my finger while I was removing the little safety thing on the point. Good knife. Maybe not the best brand name in the world, but definitely a workable, functional knife. And I haven't had any real issues with it, and it's strapped to my pack. So I'm obviously going to be using it a lot. If I run across any issues, I might post a follow-up to this video. But in the meantime, if you like this video, I'm not planning on doing a bunch of reviews on survival equipment, but I will be doing some other cool stuff. So go ahead and subscribe and help me out, because I'm out here in the woods and I would really love to spend more time out here. And so the more people that are following and engaging, that makes it worth my time to do these videos and kind of show off what I'm doing out here, and you guys can look at it, maybe get some ideas from my house or some other stuff that's going on. But that's just it. It's Off-Grid Gecko signing off. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for being patient with me on the review. I know some of you were kind of like, hey, what's going on? This isn't a review. Well, yeah. And I promised that I would post it, so I'm doing that. I may actually get to work on the machete tonight a little bit too. That guy's getting pretty close to done, so we'll be taking that out of the box. Maybe sooner rather than later, especially if it's raining again tomorrow, because I won't be able to do much else. So I will see you later. Thanks for watching.